There we go. All right.
Eat.
There we go. All right, so hello everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. Tonight we have a very special guest here. We have Dr. Giles, who's the Science and Research Director at the nonprofit Wild Orca. And she said that she does prefer that we do more of kind of a conversational discussion tonight, which I think all of you would be very excited about. And so she'll kind of get started off and chat about some topics, and we can just kind of go where the conversation leads us if that works for you. So kind of feel free to chime in whenever you'd like. This will be more of a discussion. And I'll hand it over to Giles here.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see faces. I was hoping that maybe we could just take a couple minutes for you guys to go around and tell me who you are and why you took the class with Salish Sea School, which I think is amazing. I'm a big fan of that program and of Amy and everybody that works with her. But I'd just like to kind of get a feel for who you are and where you're coming from, and ultimately like what your goals are for your future with marine mammals.
Do you want me to start since I'm the first one over here?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Allison Chancy, and I live up in Fort Langley in BC, right along the Fraser River, actually, like 4 houses away. I've always been interested in southern resident killer whales. Now bigs have been added to that. I haven't had a lot of experience getting out on the water, seeing them only through this program. And I jumped on the chance. I was probably one of the first to sign up. When I came in my email, I was pretty excited because I'm retired now and I have time to follow my passion. Always been my passion. Never went to university like I'd planned. So, you know, now it's more of an interest thing, right? And trying to help in any way I can. So my only experience with marine mammals is seeing them like from land at times, like harbor seals or whatever, or on the ferry. But also back in 1987, I volunteered at the Vancouver Aquarium's Marine Mammal Rescue Center for a whole summer. I worked downtown, so after work I would go down there and help with the orphan seal program. So I'm trying really hard to get back in this year, but I understand it's pretty competitive. So I applied last week when they had their introduction thing, and haven't heard anything yet. So apparently it's really hard to get in there now. And I don't know if my age is a factor, so we'll see. But I'm fit enough to do that job, right? So, but this is just, you know, my whole family, none of them are whale crazy like me, and they just all say to me, and my friends say, I wish I had a passion like you do. Like I love something as much as you do. Because it's something I try not to talk about all the time to bore them, but I'm always reading so much information now and learning as much as I can. So really important to me. And I have a super supportive husband.
Yay.
Downstairs and family.
That's awesome. And what's your superpower?
Oh my gosh, I haven't really thought about that. I'm able to calm a situation down. Yeah, wow. When things escalate, I de-escalate, and it de-escalates is the issue. That I'm very good at that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Next one. How about Bambi? Oh, Val, I see you up there. I can't hear you though. I think you're muted.
Oh, Bambi can go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Val Unger, and I also just jumped at the chance when I got the email from the Salish Sea School. I have enjoyed being able to go out to see orcas, and also more recently, in the beginning of this year, the end of last year, the humpback in Tacoma, and I've just found this huge passion that I think I realized maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, and it's just growing. So I had no idea there was an adult class like this, And yeah, was so excited. Looking into maybe doing the 201 class too after this. So yeah, I'm super happy to be here, and also excited about the learning component and just being able to learn more about the animals that I love so much.
Cool. And what's your superpower?
I think I would say empathy. I think my superpower is, yeah, being able to be thoughtful and empathetic to the people around me. Yeah, and I guess a goal I have, I'm working as a program manager right now at a nonprofit. And so I know it's difficult to kind of get your foot in the door, but that would be a dream of mine to be able to kind of switch from more of like the healthcare nonprofit into something more related to conservation.
Well, taking a course like this and then continuing education is a fantastic way to make that happen.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hi there.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Bambi. I live in Ellensburg, Washington, so on the other side of the mountains. And I'm really excited. I was really excited to see Eva tonight because I'm a dog crazy person. And in my younger life, I was a dog trainer and I used to travel around the country
Oh, wow.
training dogs. Yeah, so when I first saw the video of you guys on the CDoc YouTube channel, I thought, this is the coolest thing, a dog trained to smell whale poop. Anyway, so, but I discovered the Salish Sea School at the Anacortes Farmers Market, and I thought, this is the coolest thing ever. Why didn't they have this when I was younger? And then voila, they have adult classes. I took the Bigs 101 class last year. That was like phenomenal.
Yeah.
Saw wild orcas for the first time in my life, even though I'm from Seattle, never saw them in the wild. So
Oh,
I learned a lot. I'm a huge animal person. I deal with hundreds of animals every day as a farmer. But the sea event, the Salish Sea event, or those, that's a whole new area for me to study, and I love it. I'm just totally into it.
awesome.
And I don't think I have a superpower.
You do. You
No.
do. What do you do?
Well, I milk goats by hand. How's that?
Oh.
I'm gonna go with that's a good one. Awesome. Nice to meet you. Jamie, are you ready to queue up?
Oh, whatever. Okay. So I'm Jamie and I live on the east side in Kirkland, and I've always been in love with marine mammals and whales. I went in a different direction in my career, and it was mostly in education. And I've lived all over the world, and I don't know if that's a superpower, but it's an experience. And during the pandemic, I wanted a way to get out of my house besides walking my dogs. And I started seeing posts about orcas being around, and I knew they were here. And I just started following them. And we're so blessed to have them here. And I just, became kind of obsessed. And I think like a lot of us, and just, thirsty for knowledge. And I think that if I was going to define my superpower, is that I'm really an intrinsic learner, and I have a thirst and want to understand, and I want to share.
Awesome. I love that. Wonderful. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Who's next? This is fun.
Oh, I can go ahead and go. My name is Beth. I live in Granite Falls in Washington. We moved here a few years ago from Texas, where I was a Texas master naturalist. And so when I moved out here, I wanted to find something like that in the area, which is how I stumbled upon Salish Sea School. and how I'm here. I just finished the Whale Museum's Marine Naturalist training program. The field trip for that's in a couple weeks, so that should be awesome. And our field trip for this class is in a couple days. Love being on the water. What I want to do with this is to become a paid naturalist, either on a whale watching boat or charters. I'm a sailor, so yeah, that's about it. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy you're here to share your experiences with us.
And what's your superpower?
Oh yeah. My superpower is also my curse, in that I can find spelling errors
Oh.
and formatting errors they just jump out at me.
Can use
I,
you.
I get that. Yep, I get that. And a curse. Fantastic. Thanks, Beth. Who's next?
I think that's all of us.
I don't think so.
We have a couple
Were there
more.
more? I can't
I
even
can go.
see them. Oh, there they
Oh.
are. Okay, I see them.
There's you. So don't try and get out of this, Dana.
Oh, sure.
I showed up a little late, and so I don't know. I was trying to get dinner for me and my daughter, so I don't know who already went, but I can go now.
Sure, Julie, thank you.
Okay. So I let's see. I spent the last few the last few years really engaged in a lot of caregiving, both in my profession and taking care of my parents, and then also I have teenagers. And so I decided that it was time for me to do something for me. And I realized when I saw Wake and Thor of the T-46s pass by a fishing pier off Box Island in a close pass, and just how exhilarating it was, and just how exciting, and I feel excited even as I'm talking about it, that's something that really gets me in the moment and makes me really happy. And so I decided that that was what I needed to do to pursue a little bit more at this time in my life to be happy. And I'm also very cerebral, and so I'm really enjoying with the whale class the experiential component, because I think it kind of balances me out and it really gets me in the present moment. And with the heaviness of all the stuff going on in the world, being in the present moment and smelling the ocean air and watching whales seems just really important right now. So so I got to spend spring break on Whidbey Island a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking, if people have heard of tennis elbow, well, I got binocular thumb, because I spent so much time like focused like this. There was the day they were at Point No Point, April 1st, and there's all these breaching photos. Well, I was like 4 miles across the way with my binoculars watching. So, and a little jealous of the people that were at one of my favorite places, Point No Point. So, yeah, so that's why I'm here. And in
Awesome.
terms of my superpower, I would say it is my intuition.
Awesome. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
How about Fiona?
Hello, everybody. I'm Fiona. I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia, up in the territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. I was born and raised on the Salish Sea here. So I think my interest in taking the course is orcas are one of the most magnificent species I've ever come across. And also, I just want to be an educated and informed, caring member of my local environment, so that I know what the issues are, and I know what to care about and what to advocate for, and who's doing good work and who isn't. So I care sort of about it from a broad environmental perspective. Obviously, the privilege of seeing orca whales is, I'm preaching to the choir, just like totally magnificent. The second time I ever saw a killer whale in the wild was on our boat trip. So it was really powerful. My superpower, I think I'm very good at like zooming out of a question and thinking about the larger context that might be informing things or that ought to be informing things.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Padmini?
Hi, I'm Padmini. I live in Seattle and I'm originally from Bombay, India, where I'd only heard and read about orcas. Never thought I'd live someplace where you could even see them from land, but here we are. And I think the reason I took the course from the Salish Sea School is just because I wanted to learn more and more and more because I don't think I can get enough of learning about orcas specifically, as well as other whales that like to travel in these waters. And I'm enjoying meeting fellow whale nerds because it is hard for me to talk about whales, and I get crickets often, especially at work. So multiple reasons for joining the Sailor Sea School, and loving every moment, soaking in all the knowledge. Um, Reading all the books. The most recent one was pretty emotionally manipulative, so enjoyed it.
What was that?
It was the Killer Whales for Seal book.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah. Um,
Can I suggest as a follow-up to that one, read Listening to Whales? That'll rejuvenate you.
okay, thank you. And I think my superpower is that I'm happy to learn anything if anyone's willing to teach me. So if you are willing, if you talk to me about, I don't know, like financial well-being in a state of calamity or whatever, I'm happy to learn as much from you as possible. If you want to teach me about snails and slugs, I'm happy to learn about it. So yeah, I want to keep learning from anyone who's willing to teach me.
Awesome. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Carolyn? Oh, yeah, Listening to Whales yeah, absolutely. Love that book. Carolyn, I'm not sure if you're trying to type to us or
No, I was just had to unmute and it disappeared and I couldn't, my fingers kept moving to the wrong place. I'm Carolyn. I live in Redmond. Jamie and I usually travel together as a pair. I've spent a lot of time on shore looking at whales. My first encounters, I was a teenager living above Alki Beach. So I've been interested in whales a long time. I've seen whales in captivity and it's bothered me. And so watching all the whales from shore, I decided I wanted to learn some more about them. And so I was happy that this class came along.
Awesome. And what's your superpower?
Probably resilience.
Well, that's a good one. We all need that a little bit.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad that you're here. I saw you on TV a couple times.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for coming. You were very well spoken.
Thank you. I love educating. I love being educated, and as somebody said, speaking with other whale nerds.
Yeah.
It's my tribe. So Dana?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Dana. Where to start? So my family grew up, or like one trip per year was going out to the San Juan Islands. And that's when I first saw killer whales from a boat. And as many of us, it happened to many of us, it just became like so amazed and interested in learning more, everything I possibly could about these animals. And so I ended up actually going to get my undergrad at the University of San Diego for environmental and ocean science. And after I graduated down there, all I wanted to do was come back to the Salish Sea region and learn more about the orcas and the ecosystem that is in this area. Of course, I moved over right at the start of COVID, which was also when the Salish Sea was first starting off, or the Salish Sea School was first starting off. So I actually started off as a marine naturalist at one of the local whale watching companies, and then I also started working at the Salish Sea School. And I just fell in love with the programs, and just getting people out on the water and educating people about the things that I love has just been so rewarding. And again, yeah, I was a naturalist for a couple of years, and then I just really wanted to do something bigger to help solve some of the other issues, especially with marine resources and natural resources. And so I started a job up here in Whatcom County as a natural resources specialist, just working to improve the natural resources of Whatcom County and protect what we have. So it's been eye-opening. I'm still learning so much, and it's been really a blast to be able to teach this course as well, with so many other people that are really passionate about the Salish Sea and orcas and protecting the amazing wildlife we have.
Cool. And what's your superpower?
Oh, I would say multitasking and staying organized. I am always dealing with, I feel like, a million things, but I'm very organized. Find a way to get it all done.
Awesome. That's a good one. Can I ask, thank you all for doing that. It's always nice for me. I very rarely have an opportunity to visit with a smaller group of people. And, you know, I never know who's listening to, you know, presentations, my own or other people's. And so whenever it's a small-ish group, I like to be able to get to know the people participating. So thank you for sharing. Do we have a hard stop at 7?
No, it just, if folks have to log out at 7, that is totally fine.
Okay.
You don't have a hard stop.
Okay, great. So I'll get through my PowerPoint pretty quickly. And then I do want to say, if there's any questions that you have, I think sometimes I can see you if I'm presenting and sometimes I can't. But if you have a question in the midst of what I'm talking about, please just interrupt me. I'm happy to just take a break and answer questions, but then I'm hoping to have a dialogue at the end. So I'll try and get through my PowerPoint pretty quickly. Has anybody seen me present an actual PowerPoint before? Okay, so I'm going to go, this is kind of my basic PowerPoint that I give when I don't know who the audience is. So I don't know what level of education people have with regard to Southern residents. This is very Southern resident focused, which is the focus of our research. But we do other things at Wild Orca as well, as far as like Biggs killer whale feces. And was just talking to Cindy Hansen at Orca Network. We're going to try and get down and get gray whale feces soon. So we can talk about some other things as well. Okay, so I'm going to just hopefully share my screen here. Okay, good. I can see you guys. Okay, so I think you can probably see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So there's my contact information. I'll have it at the end as well. And then Dana, please feel free to tag it in the chat or something in case people want to contact me afterwards. This is, yeah, I'm with Wild Orca. I'm the Science and Research Director at Wild Orca. And then I'm also a resident scientist at the University of Washington Friday Harbor Labs, where I teach a class on marine mammals in the spring. And that's where I was this afternoon until 5 teaching that class, which I love. Oh, by the way, my superpower is I can look at leftovers and know exactly what size container they're going to fit into perfectly, which is a superpower because my husband has the opposite of that, where he'll look at a thing, how much is that? And then he'll use like 5 different containers to try and fit it into one. And yeah, so that's my superpower. So I love this slide. This quote from Walt Disney was actually part of the template for this PowerPoint. just PowerPoint put this up as a sample of the kinds of things that you could do if you chose this template. But I really love this template because it really speaks to what who I am and what Wild Orca is all about, which is we've got to stop talking about what the problems are and begin doing things to change the situation for the southern residents, the salmon that they rely on, and the ecosystems that we all rely on. So Wild Orca's mission is, it's a big, but translating science into action to save southern residents from extinction. And we do this as we call it our three-pronged or three-pillared approach to this work. We have our conservation research, which is where we have our boat on the water. You can see that picture in the top right-hand corner. That's our research vessel. We've got our amazing trained scent detection dog, Eba, who is trained to sniff out killer whale feces non-invasively, so we can stay really far away from the animals and not stress them out. We collect that fecal sample off the water and send it to our lab where we can ask just endless questions. And we'll talk, I have another slide towards the end about what we can gain from that information. We take that, ultimately, we write papers, we look at other people's peer-reviewed articles, we analyze things that are being discussed in the public, and we translate that. We call it our translational science. We translate the science into language that anybody can understand. And we not only do that, but we provide an action guide on our website to help people stay engaged with the new best available science. So we have our action page, which I also at the end of the PowerPoint have some more information about that. And then lastly, which is a little bit different from a lot of nonprofit organizations and certainly different from research organizations, is that we're actively engaged in policy. And what I mean by that is that we actively seek out meetings with our elected officials. I've been told by colleagues, research colleagues, that I can't be an advocate and a scientist. And I think that that's the opposite of what the truth is that because I'm studying an endangered species, a species in crisis, I have a responsibility as a researcher to make sure that our science and other people's science is being put into the hands of policymakers in a way that they can understand, to help guide their where the science guides action. And so those are kind of our three-pronged approach, or three-pillared approach to these southern residents and their recovery. So very basic. It sounds like from what I've heard from this group of people, you guys know who the southern residents are, but just as a recap, this is, we're talking about just 74 individuals. They only eat fish. They primarily seek out, actively seek out Chinook salmon, the fattiest of the salmon species. They're in one clan, J clan. All three pods, J, K, and L, are under one clan, which is J clan, which is different. There are multiple clans in the northern resident fish-eating killer whales. We only have the one clan, and that's just these 74 individuals. They're an amazing population of animals that in their listing documents, their range is documented going up to Southeast Alaska, but really, they've only been documented in Southeast Alaska one time. That was in 2007, and that was just only J-pod. So really, their functional critical habitat is Haida Gwaii, otherwise known as Queen Charlotte Islands, just above Vancouver Island, and then all the way down to Monterey, California. Interestingly, only Ks and Ls go down to Oregon and Washington. Jays are not known to go down that far. Really, jays are not even known to go as far as the Columbia River. But so that's the kind of habitat partitioning that occurs in the winter time, so that the whales within that one clan are not coming into competition for limited prey. So when the whales were listed in 2005, we knew what the threats were, and really quickly the inland waters of the Salish Sea were designated as critical habitat, their summer core critical habitat. But it took until 2021 for the federal government to finally, in our country, get around to designating the outer coast of Washington, Oregon, and California as critical habitat for the southern residents. The Canadians were on this a lot more quickly as they were with the listing, which I think I have a slide in a minute talking about that. So I'm rushing through this, and I'm sorry. I just really want to be able to have a dialogue and conversation later. But you guys know, well, maybe some of you don't know how special this population is, because they really have been largely absent from their inland water core critical habitat since 2013. Things shifted significantly in 2013. That year marked the year in which the whales were in the inland waters less than half the amount of time that they had been since essentially since the records had been kept in the early 70s by Mike Bigg and later by Ken Balcom. So prior to 2013, we could reasonably see these guys, expect to see these guys along the west side of San Juan and up to the Fraser River, down into the Salish Sea, southern Puget Sound, from about mid-May through October, regularly. Along the west side of San Juan, July, it was very rare for more than 2 days to go by in which southern residents were not seen. Think about that. That's from June, July, and August. Those were the 3 months in which we would see them almost every day. And not only that, not just JPOD or a portion of JPOD, but all members of the Southern Resident Clan, known as a superpod. A superpod, by definition, is when all members of the Southern Resident killer whale community are within calling range of one another, not, as sometimes is wrongfully reported, a superpod being when some members of all 3 pods are seen. So that's a teaching moment for everybody. It's something that I'm a stickler about, because when we talk about a superpod being less than it is, meaning less than every member, it shifts the baseline and makes it so that it is it's less than what the reality is. Not that I'm not saying that having some members of all 3 pods together is not special, but it's what we need to be aiming for an opportunity within the environment, that the environment and the prey base is bold enough and steep enough and thick enough to ensure that all members of the Southern residents can come together. One of the things that these whales are known for is this kelping behavior. Other whales are known to kelp, but not to the degree that the Southern residents have been documented. These whales actively seek out kelp beds, roll around for sometimes an hour or more in kelp beds. This picture on the left is these twins are 23 years old. They were about 7 in this photo. And this is a picture of them watching J2, otherwise known as Granny, roll around in the kelp beds in front of Limekiln State Park, Whale Watch Park. And Granny took about 40 minutes to just barrel roll her way up the west side of San Juan, seemingly luxuriating in this kelp spa. And this is something that the Southern residents are known to do, actively seek out floating kelp mats or come along very close to shore and roll around in the kelp. Another really phenomenal behavior that we used to be fortunate to see is a greeting ceremony. And this was when one pod, usually it was J pod, who would come back to the summer area first, would be here. And when another pod would come in for the first time after having been gone for sometimes months and months at a time, they would greet each other in this way where all members of one pod would face the other pod. And sometimes they would travel miles to get to within a couple hundred meters of each other. And then all of the pods would line up where all of J pod is touching one another, peck to peck, facing off against K pod or L pod. Or maybe it was J's and K's facing L pod. And they just hover there and they don't move. They just stare at each other until some social cue Humans have no idea what that looks like. Some social cue happens, and suddenly you just have all this massive whale ball coming together, rolling around and vocalizing, and surface active behaviors like breaching and tail slapping and peck slapping, and all the old females going off together and the males going off together, and females that are pregnant being surrounded by females, other females that might be coming into estrus soon. And it was just a phenomenal, otherworldly thing to get to witness. And we don't get to see this anymore. I hope that it happens when these whales come into contact with each other after periods of absence from each other. We don't see it in the inland waters anymore because there's just not enough food to bring the whales here in this way. So, you know, back to the kind of facts, the Canadians listed the southern residents on the Endangered Species, their version of the Endangered Species Act called SARA, Species at Risk Act, in 2001. And finally, after back and forth delays from our federal government, we finally listed them in November of 2005. And there were other threats that were documented, but the main identified threats were lack of prey, specifically salmon and specifically Chinook salmon, vessel presence and associated noise, so vessels of all types, and then exposure to toxicants. So by toxicants, I mean man-made chemicals. Toxins are chemicals that are made by poisonous things that are made by plants and animals. Another teaching moment there. Toxicants are chemicals that are made by humans. Toxins are made by plants and animals. So exposure to toxicants that are released into the water, usually from the terrestrial realm, making their way in and around the food web, the marine food web, and then ultimately up into the whales that are eating these fatty, rich, hopefully fatty, rich Chinook salmon. So the southern residents are Chinook eaters. They really have co-evolved eating Chinook salmon. Again, these are salmon that in the past would have been massive and very, very lipid rich, very full of nutrients. And these whales cooperatively hunt and share food, which is another very devastating thing when you think about the fact that the food is so patchy now, the prey is so limited that these whales are having to share food that is now puny by comparison to what their prey used to be in the past. And so these are some pictures that really drive home what I'm trying to say. The picture on the left is a picture of men standing knee or thigh deep in sockeye salmon. This is 50,000 sockeye salmon in a cannery around the turn of the last century. But this same scene could have been played out in canneries that were harvesting coho and chum and Chinook and herring and everything pretty much. Around the turn of the last century, we became incredibly efficient killing machines, able to extract massive amounts of protein from the marine realm. And in doing so, we jeopardized and really threw into havoc the entire marine ecosystem. So, you know, people often wonder, how can you have this massive, you know, animal like a killer whale, long-lived killer whale that just eats fish? Well, the pictures on the right show that, answer that question. Fish used to be massive. The pictures, a picture on the top shows two Chinook salmon that one was 116 pounds, one was 121 pounds. These are fish that were no doubt bound for the Snake River, which is why you will be hard pressed to find a killer whale biologist that says that it's not imperative that we remove the Snake River dams, because the genetics for fish to get big, not this big probably ever again, but still get big, it's called the spring gene. The gene is still present in wild Chinook salmon that are native to the Snake River. So this is what the southern residents co-evolved foraging on, which explains why you can have an animal that needs to eat several hundred pounds of food per day per whale can actually just be fish eaters. And this is a picture, this is a graphic from Linda Mape's book, which is a fabulous book. If it's not already in your on your bookshelf, it should be. It's called Shared Water, Shared Future. I think Orca, Shared Water, Shared Future. And this is a graphic by Emily Eng, and she's a graphic artist from Seattle Times. And I just love this graphic. It actually needs to be updated because it only goes through 2017, but it shows the rivers of origin of Chinook salmon that would have been critical and someday, hopefully, still are critical for the southern resident killer whales. And you can see by the dark red and orange lines that make up the rivers that the vast majority of the runs that the whales co-evolved with are on the endangered species list themselves. And, the biggest problem is that we, our government and international bodies that manage fisheries allow a tremendous amount of fish that are born in Washington waters, Oregon waters, Idaho waters that are coming down through the Columbia River, fish that are born in tributaries and along the main stem of the Fraser River. These are fish that naturally and over millennia have gone to Alaska to forage on the nutrient-rich cold water in Alaska. They are allowed by our fisheries management decisions to be caught in Alaska and deemed Alaskan fish and sold around the world as sustainably harvested Alaskan Chinook salmon. This picture on the right is a picture taken at PCC Market in Seattle by a friend of mine this last summer. And this shows you the cost of an actually sustainably harvested run of Chinook salmon. This is Chinook that is coming out of the Copper River in Alaska. It's a terminal fishery, meaning that they're catching these fish at or near the river of origin. And yet, the vast majority of fish that are caught in Alaska are not native to Alaska. In the troll fishery alone, up to 97% of fish caught in Alaskan fisheries are not native to Alaska, and yet they get branded as being Alaskan caught wild Chinook salmon. And the consumer is trained because of the Marine Stewardship Council puts out these sustainable seafood guides that says Alaskan caught Chinook salmon is a sustainably harvested fish, when they cannot say that because, as I said, up to 97% of the fish caught there is not native to Alaska and yet gets branded as Alaskan. So this picture, this graphic really tells the story. I need to update this one as well, but the trends are the same. In a nutshell, each of these colors represents a different river of origin of Chinook salmon that has been in the past vital to the recovery of or the well-being of the southern residents. These are the fish that the southern residents would have been aiming for. And in a nutshell, when you have low numbers of Chinook, you have high numbers of southern resident killer whale deaths. So when there's coast-wide low abundance of Chinook salmon, we've got high numbers of southern resident deaths. So this is a negative bar chart up here at the top. So the longer the purple bar, the more deaths in the southern resident community there are that year. And those are very tightly correlated with low abundance of Chinook salmon for that year. So what are we doing about that? Wild Orca, as I mentioned, we've got our conservation research utilizing this amazing trained scent detection dog, Eba, who allows us to collect whale feces and from very, very far away. We don't need to get anywhere near the whales. And she takes us to samples by having us reorient our vessel at a 90-degree direction to the wind. So if the wind is coming if you imagine the wind is coming from the top of your screen, the whales are going from the left to the right, and they leave us a scat sample, and the wind is coming from the top of the screen to the bottom. We orient our boat all the way at the bottom of the screen and then drive parallel to their path. And then as soon as we enter the scent cone, any odor puts out a scent cone, the wind is going to come across that scat sample, pick up the odor, and carry it at a 90-degree angle away from that scat sample. And as soon as we enter that cone right here in the green, Eva will have her first change of behavior. And that's when we start really paying attention to what she's telling us. And again, in a nutshell, it's a little bit more complicated, but we literally follow her nose. she might lose the scent, and then we have to maybe turn back around and go back on a 90-degree in the opposite direction. But she will take us, and it's usually this kind of zigzag motion, right to the scat sample. We collect the scat sample off the water, ideally using a scoop, which is a 1,000 ml beaker on the end of on the end of a pole. We'll scoop the scat sample out of the water. And I just want to pause here and say that these scat samples are really massive. These days, sometimes this is all we find. Just a tiny, teeny, tiny little bit like this. We had 5 of our scat samples last year. I just found out this morning talking to our lab. 5 of our scat samples that EBA helped us find were too small to do many of the analyses. We'll be able to tell DNA who left us the sample, but they were too small even to do hormone work on. And for hormone work, all we need is about 2 mils of material, which is about the size of a pencil eraser. And 5 of our scat samples from last year were too small even to do that. So that's telling you that the whales are not getting enough to eat. Just like you and me, if we're eating a lot, we have nice, healthy, abundant bowel movements. Same with the southern residents. When they're not getting enough to eat, they end up kind of pooping out a very, very watery, diffuse cloud that ends up being very, very small little bits and pieces. Like even this, I can tell you right now, because of the thickness of that little bit, that would have been enough for our lab to have extracted hormones. So I just want to show a really quick little video of what why EBA does this work.
Get it, EBA, get it. Good job. Good girl.
She just looked over at me. So these are the things that we are looking for in a scat sample. So we can tell who pooped it out. We can tell the individual DNA. So we can say who the whale was. If it's a female, we can say whether or not she's pregnant. Not only how that she's pregnant, but how pregnant. We can look at things like stress hormones, nutrition hormones. Our colleagues at CDOC Society and another division of the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, they're looking at things like fungus and gut microbiome. We're looking at parasites and toxicants. We can look at persistent organic pollutants. So many things that we can look at from fecal samples. And what the scat samples are telling us so far is really sad. What the scat samples tell us is that almost 70%, 69.8% of the females in this population who are getting pregnant are losing their pregnancies prematurely because they are not getting enough to eat themselves. So they're spontaneously miscarrying their calves, or the calf is born and dies right away. Large, like we saw with J60 in December. When the whales are not getting enough to eat, we see an amplification of toxicants in their feces. That's because the whales are having to metabolize their fat stores. And those toxicants, which are called lipophilic toxicants, they are fat-loving toxicants. They usually will stay stored, locked up in the fat relatively safely if the whales are getting enough to eat every day. We also see an increase in stress hormones when the whales aren't getting enough to eat. And all of this ultimately leads to early disease and death. So kind of in summary, quickly, at Wild Orca, we're steeped in kind of the discipline of conservation biology. We wholeheartedly adhere to the tenets of conservation biology, which state that species have intrinsic value separate from what humans can gain from them. And it's our responsibility as researchers to make sure that our science is being put into the hands of the public and policymakers who can actually do something about the plight of these endangered whales. So to learn more about what you can do, we do have our action guides. Right now, our action right now has to do with breaching the Snake River dams, asking our representative, Senator Maria Cantwell, to get behind breaching the Snake River dams. We have another one coming out about bycatch really soon. So if you're at all interested, and I hope you are, just kind of get on our, you can sign up to get our once a month summary update, and you can just stay plugged in. That's kind of what our website looks like, getting involved with our action alerts. So shout out to my team. I couldn't do this without them. Most of my team are volunteers. Everything from our communications director, our copy editor, our GIS specialist. Our dear friend Susan Anderson passed away at the beginning of this year. All of these people volunteer their time to do this work. And so for you folks, I would absolutely urge you to reach out to a nonprofit of interest and see what you can do. You know, we're often financially strapped, so there's often not jobs, but sometimes there are jobs that are available, but there's oftentimes available volunteer positions. So also so many thanks to our supporters. We obviously could not do the work that we're doing without our supporters. So let me stop there. I ran through that so fast, and I actually couldn't see if anybody had any questions, but hopefully it looks like we've got 6 allotted minutes, but I'm happy to stick around a little bit longer if people have questions or want to have a conversation. I would love to do that.
I have a 2-part question in regards to the Chinook salmon on the Snake River. You said that they have a spring gene, which is a gene for them to be extra large. Now, we have hatchery fish that also use that river. Do they breed together? And is that gene a dominant gene, or is it a recessive gene in the wild salmon?
That's a great question about the gene. I would encourage you to watch a movie called The Lost Salmon. It's by Shane Anderson, and it's on Netflix, I believe. You might also just be able to Google it and look at it on YouTube. In the film, they don't talk about the recessive or dominance of the gene. So I don't actually know the answer to that question. What I can tell you is that they have found it. They weren't, this is a new discovery that just happened within the last 5 years. Researchers from UC Davis, fish biologists from UC Davis were able to isolate that spring gene that is still present in wild stocks. Now, the situation with hatcheries is a complicated one because not all hatcheries, this is my kind of patent answer for hatcheries, not all hatcheries are created equally. The very sad fact of the matter is that without hatcheries right now, the southern residents would be in a worse situation than they are right now. The most important thing to think about with regard to hatcheries is that hatcheries need to be done thoughtfully. Hatchery releases need to be done thoughtfully. They need to be done at times where the exiting salmon smolt are not in direct competition for prey with wild stocks. And that's not the case often. It's also challenging when, kind of the fix is to just continue to dump more and more and more hatchery fish into the system. That is not the answer for long-term recovery, certainly not of wild Chinook salmon. And it's certainly not the answer to southern residents' plight. Fish these days, the average size Chinook salmon in Washington state, does anybody want to venture a guess?
I think it's like 12 to 15 pounds.
It's 12.5 pounds.
12.5 pounds, okay.
They say 10 to 15 pounds. It's 12.5 pounds. And actually last year it was even less than that. So when you're talking, and some of that has to do with hatchery hybridizing, and a lot of it has to do with the fisheries, the way, when and where and how we're allowing fisheries to occur. We're allowing fisheries to occur in essentially salmon nursery grounds, where you have this mix of stocks of different age and, you know, basically different years of salmon that are being harvested at the same time. And we long time ago harvested the biggest of the fish. This is why I am a huge proponent of what's called terminal fishery. I mentioned it earlier, where you're doing fishing at or near the rivers of origin, because in this way, fishermen can keep an eye on what it is that they're harvesting. It's not a mix of stocks. It's not a bunch of different salmon of different age being, you know, swooped up at the same time. And so all of these things matter. It's like we need a massive overhaul of fisheries management if we're going to get a handle on the southern residents' recovery.
Thank you.
I have a question to do with salmon. Is it, my understanding is that it takes, if they stop the fishing for Chinook salmon, it would be like a 5-year return or 7-year return?
Ideally.
Is supposed to help them, right? So then I guess in Alaska, which they have been fishing a lot of the salmon that comes from all the rivers down here, they did put that in place, but then someone's stopped that. I guess it never went through, but I did read the other day that there's an agreement between Canada and the US to stop fishing the Yukon River, which I guess is helpful, but hopefully, I don't know.
It's not helpful for the southern residents. It's helpful for the Yukon stocks, absolutely. Yeah. And it will be beneficial to the tribes that have relied on the Yukon fish for since out of mine. It's not going to help the southern residents, but the same thing that's happening there needs to happen here.
Yeah.
We need to give the fish a break, and we need to allow fish stocks to recover. And, you know, people wonder, like, how on earth can you make that happen? And, you know, what is that going to do to the economies in Alaska? Well, our answer, Wild Orca's answer, has always been we need to subsidize fishing. Mm-hmm. We need to subsidize fishing in the same way that we subsidize agriculture and the meat industry in this country, terrestrial bound agriculture and meat. We've never subsidized fishermen not to fish. And that's what needs to happen. Nobody wants to see fishermen, especially tribal fishermen, going out of business and not being able to feed their families. But a way to recover the wild stocks of fish that everybody relies on, we have to take a step back. We have to limit fishing to some degree, maybe not full stop, maybe doing it selectively, where we're you know, kind of choosing the best bang for the buck with regard to, you know, what are the runs that would have the best recovery potential for the salmon themselves and the southern residents that rely on them, and the tribes and local fisher folk that are down here. It's just crazy. It doesn't make any biological sense to me that we're not managing fish from the fish's perspective, where we're allowing so much fish from rivers down here to be harvested in another state far north of here, hundreds of miles away north of here, and branded as Alaskan fish. Mm-hmm. When these fish are on the endangered species list themselves, it just doesn't make practical sense. And we continue to do it because it's how it's been done. And to be blunt, NOAA has abdicated their responsibility to make sure that they're allowing fisheries to occur that are sustainable. And that's what the lawsuit was that you're talking about, where two separate judges found in favor of a lawsuit that was asking for the summer and I think winter, summer and maybe winter or fall troll fishery to cease until NOAA was able to go back and do a new biological opinion, because NOAA admitted they were operating on an old biological opinion. And at the last minute, a 3-judge panel was able to overturn those other 2 judges' rulings and allow that fishing to occur. And it started on July 1, and within 8 days, they had already overfished their quota. Wow. And it's unfortunate, because if we would just take a step back and give the salmon half a chance to rebound, they're incredibly resilient animals. I do believe that we would see a shockingly positive returns. And then ultimately that's going to benefit everybody. And then really, I'm harping on it, but we need to think about, at least at certain times of the year for certain runs, to go back to a more terminal fishery where we're fishing at or near the river of origin.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any thoughts or anything you'd like to share or ask questions?
I have, can you hear me? This is Carolyn. I have two questions. Is there a salmon that is okay to eat? And it's supposed to be a dry year in Washington. Is that going to affect the salmon runs at all?
Yes, it is. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, we were just, the state of Washington was just deemed to be in a drought. It's going to have profound impacts on the salmon that would be exiting our rivers this year. And I'm certain that the other things, you know, the same can be said probably for Canadian southern, you know, BC rivers. You know, the snowpack in BC is down significantly as well.
It's the lowest it's ever been. They just said today, lowest it's ever been. Yeah.
So when you're talking about a species of animal that rely on strong bursts of water coming out of rivers that they co-evolved in, having low water flows down rivers is going to be very, very impactful. You know, it's all so very interconnected. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, 150 years ago, we became incredibly efficient killing machines, able to extract almost everything in our path. And I think we need to recognize that and own that and be responsible stewards for the natural world in ways that will allow for these animals, these species to continue to occur in the future. And the way that we're operating right now, that's not going to happen. I think I got off track as far as what the question was, but it's scary. Oh, what are the salmon that you can eat? You know, pink salmon. Whales don't want to eat pink salmon, but so neither do humans, because they're not that fatty. You know, it's hard for me to say that because I've never eaten salmon of any kind. One time, and I did not like it. I was a kid. But so from a sustainable question, if there's any way that you can be seeking out fishermen, ideally tribal fishermen that are fishing at or near the rivers of origin, that would be ideal. So that you're not only supporting the salmon, but you're supporting the tribes that are you know, have fished in those areas for you know, for since again time out of mind. You know, like if that's not a possibility, quite honestly, you know, I think one of the biggest problems is that we just shouldn't have salmon in places like Ohio. Like, why do we have wild caught Chinook salmon in Ohio or in Alaskan caught wild Chinook salmon in Portugal or England? And I only name those specific places because that's where we were finding. I was asking people during COVID to go and look at their fish market and see where the fish was coming from. And these are fish that were you know, fish that had the label wild caught Chinook salmon, Alaskan wild caught Chinook salmon. And I'm not saying they're wild salmon. I'm saying they're caught in the wild. They're not farmed, and so they could be hatchery fish, or they could be wild runs, wild genetics. But anyway, being caught in Alaska, being sold in Portugal, and being sold in England, and being sold in Ohio, and that's just crazy to me when we're talking about fishing and eating an endangered species. this is a mind blower. Salmon are the only species of animal or plant that are on the endangered species list that we actively are killing and eating. It's a very weird thing to think, right? We're actively killing, seeking out and killing and eating an endangered species. Why are we doing that when they're so threatened? It doesn't make any sense to me. So, Carolyn, I'm not the best person to ask about what fish to eat. I would say not salmon.
I think just jump off of your points, Giles. There was this article that came out last year, I think last year, of a halibut fishery that was happening to have a lot of Chinook salmon bycatch. That I think, right, that the fish were dead before they were before they were putting them back in the water. And to bring back to your point of this is an endangered species and they're being wasted in a different fishery, and the halibut's being caught for cheap fish products, right? Like fish sticks and stuff that's processed in
Right,
supermarkets. So
right.
I don't have a real question. It was just about there.
That's a great observation. And it's not just halibut, it's things like hake, which most generic white fish things like your, chicken, your fish fillet and fish sticks, fake crab that's in sushi, all of that are the kind of the generic white fish like hake and pollock. And there is sometimes more bycaught Chinook salmon in those fisheries, poundage wise, than is allowed for those fisheries to be caught. So said another way, let's say there's a allowable catch of 10 pounds of pollock. Sometimes these pollock fisheries are catching more than the 10 pounds of pollock, but in Chinook as bycatch, and those fish get thrown back as dead fish. So when people say, oh, well, I just won't eat salmon, I'll eat, whatever else, it's not that cut and dry. Because as Padmini said, these are fish that are caught in areas that are occupied by Chinook, and the Chinook are killed accidentally, also known as incidentally or bycaught fish. Those are all three words that are used for the same thing. They're accidentally caught and thrown back dead. So that's even like a worse thing. Like we're not even harvesting them and actually eating them. We're just throwing them back dead, because right now the laws are that the bycatch has to be thrown back. It can't be kept. Oh, it's shocking.
It's wild.
I really, I did an interview with one of my heroes last week, a week ago yesterday, Sylvia Earle, Dr. Sylvia Earle. She was the first woman that was allowed to be the head of a research project on a ship, like an ocean-going ship, a research cruise. She was one of the first women to scuba dive, and took a whole schwack of women down in the 60s, and they lived underwater. She's just a phenomenal woman. She's truly one of my heroes. She's the Jane Goodall of the ocean. And I was just so honored to be asked to participate in a podcast that she and her daughter did last week. It's called Dive In. You don't need to watch mine because I basically gave the same talk. But if you want to see her wonderful comments, go ahead and watch that. But Sylvia says don't eat anything from the ocean right now. Just don't eat anything from the ocean. And I stand behind that. Or ideally buy it from a local tribal fisherman that is harvesting at the river of origin.
I don't think in Canada we're allowed to actually buy fish from First Nations, unfortunately. I'm not sure.
Why?
Yeah, it's for themselves, not to sell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's okay.
But
Well,
I live near First Nations, and one of the guys was smoking salmon last year and was selling it on Facebook. I never did buy it, but I wondered how we got around that because I'm fairly certain that's how it's set up here.
Well, and ask him what, you know, because for better or for worse, a lot of tribes have been driven because of the way that other fisheries are occurring. A lot of tribal members are forced to go to Alaska themselves and fish because the fish are just not making it back to their natal rivers.
Yeah. Yeah. Being a
You
vegan.
mentioned,
Yeah.
you mentioned some of the didn't you mention Patty Murray and Marina Catwell, or am I thinking of another talk?
No, I mentioned Maria Cantwell. She's
Okay.
the focus of our action, you know, for you to be able to contact her and ask her to reach the dams.
Okay. Okay, good to know.
I actually had an opportunity to meet with Senator Cantwell twice in December, a week apart, which was pretty exciting. And on the first meeting, I only got about 5 minutes with her, and I very quickly, like, I don't even know how I did it, but very quickly talked to her about the issue of the Alaskan fishery and how the Alaskan fishery was, you know, highly focused on the fish from Washington, BC, Canada, and Oregon. You know, again, up to 97% of fish caught in the troll fishery, which occurs 10 months out of the year in Alaska, is 97% at times is from non-Alaskan rivers. And that got her attention in that first 5-minute talk. And then when I got to see her again a week later, she actually like pointed at me across the room and was like, let's talk. And she had put it the first day, the prior week, she said, you need to talk to my main aide, Nikki, who's in DC. She needs to hear this. And so I did manage to get a call with Nikki and told her about it in better detail. And then the following week, when I had an opportunity to meet with Cantwell at this other fundraiser, she said that she wanted to know more about the Alaskan fishery and the idea of subsidizing fishermen not to fish. She said that when I said it the week before, it was the first time that she had ever heard it, and that felt like something maybe she could actually do, like not just her, but like politically, that might be something that might be manageable, where we're not putting fishermen out of, out of a paycheck, so that we're, putting people in the poorhouse, if you will, but rather just, helping to subsidize them so that we can all be better stewards of the marine realm. And I need to follow up with her. It's on my agenda soon. I need to loop back with her and with Nikki to see where we are with that. But that's something that Wild Orca has been pushing for since 2017, is subsidizing fishermen.
So I have a question in regards to, I get notices from the WDFW in regards to the fisheries that are opening for certain days, the areas, locations, Chinook salmon, humpies, whatever. And so the WDFW doesn't control the marine mammals. NOAA does that, but they do control the fishing. And so why do they open certain areas for Chinook, and then they'll open it for a few days, then they close it, then they'll say, oh, it's open again, and like they're basing it on some number of fish that they're seeing coming through, but that number that's allowed is being given to them from NOAA. Is that correct?
Yes and no. There's a whole it's called the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, and it's made up of people from tribes, the state, federal, different fishing groups, different fishing interests. They all work together to come up with fishing quotas. Unfortunately, they often, almost always, overestimate the number of fish that are going to be returning at different times. So different runs of fish, different species of fish, different runs of fish, and basically different times of the year. And they self-admit that they are often overestimating the amount of fish that are going to be coming back. And so that's why you sometimes see these openings and then quick closings. And then they'll open it again and then close it again.
Right.
My biggest beef with that is that the Southern residents are not directly factored in as a major stakeholder, meaning they're not given a quota of fish. They're not given a certain amount of fish that is left in the ocean for them to forage on. And unfortunately, the Southern residents are at the extreme southern end, this extreme southern range of fish-eating killer whale populations. So we've got, again, these fish that are native to down here, going to Alaska to forage, who are, trying to avoid being caught by humans, avoid being caught by northern resident fish-eating, Southeast Alaskan fish-eating killer whales. Farther south would be the northern resident fish-eating killer whales, and then all the way at the bottom are the southern resident fish-eating killer whales. And that is exactly why I think it is imperative that we go back, at least for certain times of the year, on certain runs of salmon, we go back to a more terminal fishery where we're allowing some of these fish that are native to these waters down here to make it all the way back to southern killer whale range.
Right.
That is not being done right now.
Oh, no, because those notices are coming to me daily, open, close. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah. Exactly. So, that's a process that the public can get involved with. Pacific Fisheries Management Council, I will tell you, it can be mind numbing and completely overwhelming as far as like, what are they talking about and what is this happening? But there are a group of 5 of us right now that are trying to figure out a way to provide the information to the public and provide opportunities for the public to engage at critical times during the Pacific and North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. So this is the other travesty is that there's the Pacific Fisheries Management Council that's has jurisdiction over fish that come out of Idaho, so through the Snake and into the Columbia and out. BC, Canada, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and California, that's the purview of the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. And then in Alaska, separate is the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. This is what I was talking about, like where we're not managing fish from the fish's perspective. We're allowing fish to be managed, that fish from down here to be managed and caught unsustainably in a different council region. Why? I don't know. We're crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Money, yeah.
Money.
So there's this group of us that are trying to figure out, it's hard. It's hard, like if I was 5 people and I could split myself up into 5 people, one of them would live in Alaska and attend the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council meetings 4 times a year and be a part of that council. And another one would be part of the Pacific Fisheries Management Council group down here, going to all of those meetings and weighing in. But, I'm not 5 people. And, but that is something that the public can weigh in on. You can call in and give your comments, give your input. And that's really, truly what needs to happen. The public needs to get engaged in fisheries management.
Wow.
It's a lot, but it's vital. It's truly vital. Because in a lot of ways, I really feel that the powers that be right now are winding down the clock on wild stocks of salmon and winding down the clock on southern residents, just waiting and making poor decisions that are going to result in the extinction of these salmon and the whales that rely on them.
Going back to your research, I just had a quick question. I was thinking about like the J-pod hangs around Salish Sea more frequently in the winter now. KNL, no one seems to know anything I read. No one seems to know exactly where they go. But when they come back, and or if they come back, but I'll stay positive, when they do finally come back in the summer, and you're doing your research out in the Salish Sea, doing your poop samples, do you find are there, out of the 3 pods, is there one pod in particular that has healthier poop? Like that K&L might have found something and they come back healthier, maybe J-pod not leaving isn't so healthy. Like I'm not too sure. Like I'm just curious with that.
It depends on it depends on the season and it depends on the year. Ultimately, there's not a kind of a blanket answer to that question.
Okay.
We do often, when the whales are first coming back into the Salish Sea after being gone for an amount of time, regardless of what pod it is, we do see larger fecal samples.
Okay.
And then if the southern residents are resident to this area because of the historical Fraser River Chinook salmon.
Right.
We talk a lot about dwindling stocks of Washington-based salmon, but truly the southern residents are resident to the Salish Sea because of the Fraser River in the past.
Yeah, I know.
And what's happening on the Fraser River is just it's heartbreaking. The Fraser does not have dams per se, but there's like 300 water diversion areas along the Fraser that are diverted for agriculture that are functionally they're the same things as dams.
Yeah.
When they're closed, the fish can't get past them. And then there's tremendous input of runoff of toxicants, man-made chemicals into the river because of agriculture. We've denuded along the entire in the entire world. We've denuded riparian corridors of the river forests, which were vital to river health. We allow agriculture to come right up to the river's edge. Yeah. And these are also things that we need to be getting a handle on and doing habitat restoration for the long-term health of salmon runs that again, I always talk about the need of the southern residents because they co-evolved eating salmon. We have other choices. We can eat other things.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is partly because the northern residents seem to be doing better. They're the other salmon fishing or salmon eating whale, right? Killer whales. So yeah.
They're farther, they're farther north. They also would have relied on Fraser River Chinook salmon, but they also have first crack before the southern residents. They have second crack. They're kind of like the
Orcas.
Yeah. So they have access to the food before the southern residents do. And these are populations of whales that selectively habitat partition in order to avoid competition. So we don't see the southern residents going up into northern resident range much, and vice versa.
They have a slight crossover sometimes.
They do, but no breeding amongst the populations.
No. Interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So a few years ago, I know that in British Columbia there was a salmon farm with Atlantic salmon that accidentally released a lot of salmon into the wild. And I'm wondering if you can give us an idea of how this impacted our native salmon populations in our local waters, whether that was like I mean, at the time it was like a crisis, and I know that there were a lot of native fishermen trying to like scoop up the farmed salmon that got released and escaped. And I'm wondering how a couple of years later how that's played out.
Well, what you're talking about actually happened in Washington. That happened very near Anacortes, on the way to the San Juans, actually. It was on Cypress Island, and it was Cook Aquaculture, catastrophic net failure, released hundreds of thousands of Atlantic salmon into the Salish Sea. And yeah, I mean, we can thank the tribes that were able to rally incredibly quickly to try and recover the bulk of those fish. It's a travesty that happened. I don't know why we have Atlantic salmon being farmed in the Pacific Ocean. Farmed salmon is very bad for wild stocks. It's even bad for hatchery fish because they tend to orient these salmon farms right at the mouth of rivers that are also host to wild stocks. You know, we can thank Alexandra Morton and her cadre of people to really waking people up to the devastation that fish farms have caused to wild stocks of salmon. And those salmon farms are largely coming out, although there's now some pushback. And thanks to our state, Washington State, it's illegal to have fish farms in Washington waters. And yeah, so long-term impacts, I think we lucked out in a nutshell. I think we lucked out. The timing was such that we were able to get most of those fish out of the water before they made it up into spawning areas for natural fish. And people were on high alert and looking for strays up rivers, and those fish were fished out. If we allowed fish farms to occur to the degree that fish farm companies want to have in Washington and BC waters, you know, we could just kiss wild stocks goodbye. And thankfully, the state of Washington has taken a strong stance against that.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I think Alexandra Morton is getting behind the clay quad action out in Tofino. Trying to get rid of them out there now. I'm starting to see her more and more get involved in that, which I'm really happy to see, because she really did an awesome job in the Brighton.
She's another one of my ocean heroes. I think she's so amazing. Any of her books that you can get your hands on, she's a wonderful writer and such an amazing activist for salmon and whales.
Yeah.
I love that this conversation has essentially become a salmon conversation, and we're in an orca class, but of course the two are intricately linked. So, I mean, that brings the importance to life. It's pretty obvious that we need to save salmon, not only for the orcas, but also for ourselves, for a sustainable future for humans. But, you know, I do remember reading a while ago that you know, there's a lot of impact that the salmon have even on the land that we live on. Like when they come back and they've spawned, their bodies die, they fertilize our earth, we have tall trees as a result. Are we seeing any impact of the lack of return on our earth and fertility, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I've one of my jaw-dropping tidbits of knowledge that I remember gaining was when I was told by somebody giving a talk on the health of the forest in the Olympic Peninsula that foresters have cored into trees on the Olympic Peninsula and found salmon DNA, which is just, you know, very clear evidence that these, you know, salmon were the ecosystem engineers for the Pacific Northwest. It's why we have the habitats that we have is because of salmon. All I can tell you is that it's so clear that the upland habitat, terrestrial habitat, is suffering from the lack of the ocean nutrients and the nutrient, you know, basically the nutrients that the salmon bring to the upland watersheds, where some tribes actually are putting salmon carcasses into forests to give that nutrients back. You know, even dropping them from helicopters and planes and stuff to add those nutrients back in. It's vital. And a lot of that, you know, we have to start taking seriously the need to replant the riparian corridors. You know, we should have riparian corridors, meaning river forests that are at least 3 times as wide as the tallest natural native tree is tall on both sides of the river, just to give you an idea of how big of an area that is. That is a tremendous effort and at cost and time and effort. You know, I've gotten pushback from this in the past, and, you know, like, oh, well, gosh, you know, it's going to take tens of, you know, 20, 30, 40 years to have those forests be functional forests again, river forests again. And, you know, the only thing that I can say to that is, well, we better get going. You know, there's a classic thing, a classic saying that says, when was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When was the next best time? Today.
Thank you. And does Wild Orca do any work collaboratively with the native tribes in this area?
I work not physically, but I do a lot of consulting and talking with members of the Lummi tribe, employees of the Swinomish tribe, and then the Nez Perce tribe on the Snake River. Those are kind of my people that I have the closest relationships with. And I am, I am actively seeking deeper connections, wanting to know more what Wild Orca can do to support the tribes. I'm fortunate to live on San Juan Island and be friends with Jay Julius, a former chair of the Lummi tribe. He and his kids are adult kids are the co-owners of the 2 fish markets here on the island, and so I really am so supportive of his family and his tribe, and then I've been very honored to get to know Shannon Wheeler, the chair of the Nez Perce tribe. So again, whatever Wild Orca can do to support tribal efforts is high on our list of things to do for sure.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, thank you so much. We went over a half an hour. And I know that first 30 minutes was spent for me getting to know you amazing people. So thank you for sharing your evening with me. And my contact information, I think, is available. I know it is at the beginning of the PowerPoint and at the end, if you want to grab that. But it's also easy. It's just giles@wildorca.org. So yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for your interest in the whales. I always say the whales need their tribe of humans to be fighting for them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was excellent.
This is great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your class. I'm jealous I'm not a part of it, but so nice to meet you all and hope to see you around.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll see the rest of you guys on Friday and Saturday this week.
Yeah.
Happy whales.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.